Hello, this is Catherine Curran from the Minnesota Center for Systemic Constellations, and I'm pleased and honored to have as our guest Francesca Mason Boring, who will be leading our next constellation weekend in person on September 16th through the 18th in St. Paul, Minnesota. And the name of the weekend is called Family, Nature, and Human Systemic Constellations as Ceremony, The Courage to Connect, which I find is a really intriguing title since we don't. So I'm going to ask you, I guess, probably about that too. Francesca is one of the best respected and longest practicing constellators, certainly in the United States, and I think maybe in North America, and has been, but you can correct me, and has been practicing constellations for over 20 years. She's the author, she's a prolific author in this area. She has a new book coming out soon, and I'll ask her about that at the end. And she is also on the editorial board of The Knowing Field, which is the Constellations Journal. So, without further ado, I'm going to ask you some questions, Francesca, and if there's something else you want to say that you feel like I've missed, please let me know. So, or just kind of jump in. So, we're making this kind of informal. So, Francesca, I think I'm going to ask you first. What's the focus of this particular weekend for people who may have come to some of your others? Then I'll ask about new people. But what 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 might we expect, or how has your work shifted? Because it seems to me it has, or deepened.
I, first of all, thank you for the invitation, and I have so much respect for the way that you've really nurtured the work in Minnesota and a number of places. With that introduction, I really have to bow to so many facilitators in the United States that have really been my role models and my teachers, and so I really appreciate that we're all learning, and it's remarkable. So with this, I very often identify constellation as a form of ceremony. So it really is this wonderful modality where we can look at systemic factors that inhibit our ability to really love, our ability to really be joyful, to trust. So many things that we have been limited in can really be addressed and can really be, I guess I could say, even resolved by understanding what the systemic factors are that have really inhibited us. I think that what has happened, which I think is happening for many people and many facilitators, but also human beings, one of the things that I've really been struck by is how this ability to connect has so many applications. So when I look at different native traditional wisdom, there's such a place for nature. Lots of different cultures identify aspects of nature or creatures in nature as brothers or cousins, so that there's actually a familial identification. So that when we say Mother Earth or Father Sky, that there really is even in some cases a parentification, that there is this acknowledgement that there are aspects of nature that are bigger than us, that actually came before we did. And so I think that the more we really look at what's implied in systems, the more we see that systems are interconnected. And so I really have come to respect that when people are doing a family constellation, they actually are changing the world, because that family is really a part of a greater systemic dynamic. And I rarely go in with intention to look at global systems, but I often have a very strong um, sense, a very strong feeling, and a strong belief that what often happens is that when we're working with someone's family system, we end up stepping into their part in a much larger field.
Hmm.
And that has implication because that connectedness is something that's real. So it may not be that the structure of the constellations looks tremendously different, although at times, if there is a collective, if there are a number of people who have lost children, or if there are a number of people who were impacted by war or Vietnam War, or if there are a number of people who happen to come to a constellation who were all orphaned,
Wow.
um, there are times that it really is appropriate to do some kind of collective ritual that honors that this field is not just individual, but actually, for whatever reason, in this group of people, the field really found a home, found a place to be acknowledged, found a place to be respected. And when we do those kinds of um, acknowledgments, there is a real felt sense that we're also honoring all of those that have that dynamic or have that painful experience.
Hmm.
Oh, yeah. Thank you for asking. I think that for all of us, our lens is just getting larger and larger and larger. But as that happens, it also comes closer to the heart. It's,
Yeah. I
uh,
can feel what you're saying about that it's not just an individual or one family, but it's like a whole interconnected web
yeah.
that can start to shift. And you also talked, and you this has been a focus before, but I see it again now in the name of this workshop as well as the name of your new book, which is the Nature Constellation Handbook, an invitation to connect, which is coming out soon, right? So, can you talk about the nature aspect as well?
Part of my hope is that people are encouraged not to see it as completely separate.
Yeah.
So we have in the linear um, lexicon that has become kind of the way that Western societies view the world. This is here, and so this must be here.
Right.
But in fact, um, for thousands of years, millions of years, up until this very recent anomaly of modernity, we really understood that there is no separation. There is no separation between my feet and the ground when I go outside and stand on the ground.
Hmm.
And so there have been actually in some family systems events in which nature may have been perceived as aggressive or dangerous. Events actually happen within family systems that encouraged a kind of a sheltering or a separation from nature. But in those events and in trying to um, shield the family from those traumas, for some family systems, there's been a further and further isolation from nature. And
Interesting.
so when this happens collectively, it really is to our peril.
Hmm.
So in looking at the invitation to connect, it is that we know that through family systems constellation and through constellations in general, we have another tool to look at specifics around environmental issues. And we have the capacity to, again, in a very gentle way, invite this connection to nature that really is one of our greatest resources.
Yes,
Yeah.
interesting. I find that the more I open up, the same thing, how
Yeah.
much I was disconnected and how that shifts for me. Um, Today I got a question from somebody who's considering coming, who's newer to constellations, and she just had basic questions like, will there be several constellations? How does this work?
Mhm.
So I think she'd done them in the past, but a while ago. So can you just say a little about the structure of the weekend?
Definitely. So it is, we have our group in a circle. And I always tell people one of the things that I love about this work is that there's a big place for no. So people have the option to stand as a representative in a constellation if they're invited, and they can also say no, they don't want to stand as a representative. Um, when people do a constellation, a family constellation, or whatever system it is that they're bringing to look at, when they do a family constellation, what is phenomenal about this work is that many people actually experience a kind of an affinity for the constellation that's happening, or an identification with it. That it can be a parallel experience to something in their life. So years ago, I used to offer that people could come to observe, and I found that that was not possible to guarantee, because someone could come with the intention of observing, and someone else would do a constellation that was completely parallel to their own family system's trauma. And so it meant that if someone came with the idea that they could just sort of check it out, they might be a bit blindsided.
Mm,
So what I've found is that whether or not someone does a personal constellation, whether it is observing, quote unquote,
mm,
or standing as a representative, virtually every person who comes has some experience.
mm,
And what I also appreciate is nothing is mandatory. So if there is something and it seems as though um, there's something implied, a particular conclusion or a particular perspective, there is no mandate that you incorporate or believe, or um, that you adopt that perspective. So
mhm.
you can say, no, I don't agree with this. It doesn't belong to me. And there's also a place for that in this work. So that's one of my favorite things. There's no such thing as a non-compliant client,
Hmm.
because everyone really is in their own soul space and has the opportunity to see what serves me. And the other part that really is so profound is that it's not just today. Um, for some people, there can be something in a constellation workshop that literally 10, 12 years later, um, there's a place and a time to integrate it.
Mhm.
So there's again, a beautiful invitation and really not a mandate. So people sit in a circle. We look at an individual's constellation um, topic or issue, or what they choose to look at. And then representatives are asked to stand. And again, they have full invitation to say, I'd rather not. And it's really a very deep shared experience that we have. And there's a tremendous amount of trust that people have in each other, and a very deep connection that people experience, because there are all these embodied perspectives or insights about someone's family system or family dynamics, even though the people in the constellation have never met
Right,
the person who is bringing the issue. And
right.
so there's such an, I guess you could say, really an intimacy
That
that's
happens really
so,
quickly.
yeah, yeah,
Not
exactly.
forced. Nobody makes it happen.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
yeah. And the other thing that I think is so important, I wish I could remember who said this, but I really held on to it because I believe that it's the case. The only thing that's needed to be an effective representative is DNA.
Hmm.
So really, any human being um, can stand as a representative and really be a vehicle for clarity for someone else's family soul. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's an amazing
So beautiful.
ability that I agree we all have, but we've kind of turned the volume down on that ability a lot, you
Yeah.
know. So, well, there's a lot of other things I'd like to ask you, but in the interest of time, perhaps we can leave it here, if that's okay with you. And we're so glad that Francesca's coming. Again, it's the 16th through the 18th of September. And I would tell you how to register, but I'm assuming if you're watching this video that you've got a link to the registration because that's how I'll send it out. Um, but if you do have questions or have a hard time registering, please reach out at Catherine, Katherine, at MN, like the state of Minnesota, constellations.com. And we really look forward to being here. It's your fourth time with us. And I consider you a mentor, and so glad that you can be here. And we hope that you'll join us. So thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. I look forward to seeing everybody. Thank you.